Welcome back, folks, to WrestleRant, where I give my in-depth analysis of all the pay-per-views that I watch on the WWE Network. Today, I'm going to be talking about the 2007 installment of WWE One Night Stand. For my full reviews of the 05 and 06 editions, they're up here on the channel, so go back and check them out. But nevertheless, this show went live from Jacksonville, Florida. Kicking off the show was Rob Van Dam and Randy Orton in a stretcher match. And WWE had some sort of a fetish with the stretcher match stipulation from 05 to 08 for some reason, or 05 to 09. They had a number of them. I was just writing an article the other day for WhatCulture.com about the top 10 stretcher matches in WWE history, and there had been a few in the late 1970s, early 1980s, but a majority of them took place in the from this time period from 05 to 09. This was only one of them, and it was not the best stretcher match I've seen. I mean, and stretcher matches are really hard to do anyways, because Jim Ross, I think, was just saying this. As I record this, it's just one day removed from Monday Night Raw for June 16th, 2014. And they had a stretcher match last night between John Cena and Kane. So, and Jim Ross tweeted out that it's really hard to do stretcher matches in a PG environment with not a lot of destruction and stuff like that. But when this matchup took place, WWE was still PG-14. I mean, it was not a PG environment or anything like that. So it was easier to do the matchup. But that being said, though, this just was an entertaining matchup. They did their best to put forth a good match. And by far the highlight of it was RVD's selling of the of all the abuse that he took from the Viper, or the Legend Killer as he was called at the time. Because the storyline going in this was that Randy Orton took out Shawn Michaels a few weeks prior at Judgment Day. Now he was targeting the other legends in the form of the ECW originals. He took out Tommy Dreamer, and now he was targeting Rob Van Dam, who he had given a concussion to the prior week on Monday Night Raw. So that's what led to this stretcher match, and this ended up being RVD's final WWE match. Not the best match to go out on, but he did sell it greatly. All the abuse he took in the end, after being dominated for most of the matchup, Randy Orton emerged victorious after RVD emerged victorious after RVD hit Orton in the head with a swift kick, put him on the stretcher, rolled him over the line quickly, and that was the end of it. But Orton got revenge after the matchup by attacking RVD. He punted him in the head again. He did his DDT, his signature patented DDT maneuver off the top of the barricade, which was a sick maneuver. Very great visual right there. And that was what wrote RVD off television. And I've heard in interviews before that RVD was not happy with the way that he was written off TV. Like I said, this ended up being his final match with the company for the time being before returning to the WWE in 2013. But just to leave it with WWE, to leave WWE with a concussion storyline was really weird. It's not like he broke his neck or broke his back or anything like that. He suffered a concussion, is what a lot of people come back from. So he thought that was lame, and I did too. But the match itself really wasn't that bad. It wasn't a terrible matchup, but it just felt lackluster. And I don't really attribute that to Orton or RVD. It was just the fact that it was a stretcher match, not the most exciting match stipulation in pro wrestling. And I also question the move to have this kick off the show. And I know RVD won the matchup, cool moment, but he ended up getting attacked. The matchup really didn't set the tone for the rest of the show. It was not the most exciting matchup on the show by far. So to have this kick off the show was really mind-boggling to me personally. But they tried. It was a decent matchup, so fine work from these two. Like I said, RVD's final match with the WWE for almost 6 years. So up next, we had a 6-man tables match with CM Punk, Tommy Dreamer, and the Sandman taking on the New Breed, collectively made up of Matt Striker, Marcus Corvon, and Elijah Burke. This storyline had been going on for a few months since WrestleMania with the ECW Originals against the New Breed. CM Punk was originally with the Originals and then joined the New Breed for a week and then turned on them and rejoined the Originals. It was really confusing, but in the end, Punk teamed with the Faces. It was a good match. I thought it was fun while it lasted. They had a few cool table spots. But the real issue with this matchup was that it was only 7 minutes long. It ended, I'm like, that's it? The fuck was that? I mean, it was fun while it lasted. It wasn't a bad match at all. I enjoyed it. But the fact that it was so short was really mind-boggling to me. Maybe they got short-handed because it was an ECW matchup. And I mean, at the time, ECW got more respect. The ECW brand got more respect than it did, later on before its conclusion, before it got wrapped up in 2010 and closed indefinitely. Or for good, I should say. But, anyways, so the matchup was fun while it lasted. It really bothered me that it only went 7 minutes. They definitely should have gotten more time. But I guess it blew off the storyline between the Originals and the New Breed. Most of the Originals would get released anyway. I think Sandman got drafted to Raw, I think the next night or or the next week or whatever. Dreamer stayed on ECW. He didn't do anything. CM Punk ended up chasing the ECW title. The New Breed, Matt Striker, became a commentator a year later. Corvon got released, and Elijah Burke got released about a year or so later too. So it was kind of a waste. Elijah Burke, after watching him in this matchup, was extremely athletic. And I watched him more. I mean, I started watching WWE in 2008, so I only saw a brief bit of Burke in WWE before he got released later that year. But I did see a lot of his work. I saw all of his work in TNA when he debuted there in 2009, and he left, I think, in either 2013 or 2012. He got sidelined with a lot of injuries, but that being said, though, I did really love him in TNA as the Pope D'Angelo Dinero, and I thought they utilized him better in TNA than they did in WWE. But I thought he had a lot of untapped potential. It might be too late for him to go back now, but even still, I digress. Good match from the ECW brand that should have gotten more time. Up next, a ladder tag team match for the World Tag Team Championships. Jeff and Matt Hardy, the Hardy Boys, taking on the world's greatest tag team, Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas. The world's greatest tag team has just recently reunited after their initial run on the SmackDown brand with Kurt Angle, and you get the point from there. You know the history. But anyway, so a very fun tag team matchup. In my opinion, the matchup probably should have kicked off the show. The Hardys have always been notorious for their ladder matches, being involved in the first ever TLC matchup and, being involved in that feud with the Edge and Christian and the Dudleys and stuff like that. But even still, though, I thought this was the matchup that should have kicked off the show. A lot of fun, entertaining action. Got great time. A lot of awesome spots. Shelton Benjamin is a fucking madman in ladder matches. I think that's been the norm for his performances in the Money in the Bank ladder matches. But that being said, though, it would be really cool. It was really cool to see all four of these guys in the same matchup. The world's greatest tag team was a great tandem while it lasted. It was cool to see them reunited against one of the best tag teams in WWE history, the Hardy Boys, in a match that they're known for, the ladder match. So it was a great matchup. I think the feud probably should have gone on a little longer. I don't really remember much about the feud. Like I said, I didn't watch. I wasn't a fan at the time. I don't know the build-up or the aftermath. But what I do know is that the Hardys lost the tag team titles the next night anyway to Lance Cade and Trevor Murdoch. When Benjamin and Haas probably should have gotten the title run instead, but whatever. What happened, happened. But it still was a great matchup. Really enjoyed it. Probably one of the best matches of the night, if not the best match of the night. Really enjoyed this. Up next, we had a lumberjack match between Mark Henry and Kane, also known for being Chris Benoit's final WWE pay-per-view appearance, because he was supposed to appear at the Night of Champions pay-per-view a few weeks later. Of course, the whole tragedy, the whole story from there, but this was his final pay-per-view appearance. He didn't wrestle, but he did serve as a lumberjack. And they came out to some generic fucking-ass music. It was really weird. But after watching it back, and I mean, they played this generic theme music over the course of the night as being the theme of the show, the theme song of Extreme Rules, One Night Stand 2007. I think it was I Don't Want to Stop by Ozzy Osbourne, but they changed it because they don't have the rights to the song or something like that. So these guys these superstars from Raw, SmackDown, and ECW are coming out to this generic rock music, and it was really weird. It kind of took away from the moment. It was really strange. But anyway, for the match between Kane and Mark Henry, it was fine for what it was. These two don't have the best chemistry, but they made the most of it. The lumberjack stipulation, it didn't really serve a purpose for the most part because both these guys could destroy anyone at ringside, and they tried to put them back in the ring, but they would get just clobbered every single time. But it did serve the purpose in that a few nights earlier on SmackDown, these two had a matchup, and King got counted out, so this prevented that from happening again. So I see the stipulation that it served here, but that being said, though, it really wasn't the best matchup these two have ever had. They never really had any great matches, but they did make the most of it. I commend them for that. It was better than expected, slightly better than expected. A fun matchup from these two, fine while it lasted, really nothing all that special. Mark Henry ended up going over. Mark Henry, a few weeks earlier, destroyed The Undertaker, put him out of action. He was going on an absolute roll at the time. They obviously wanted to further his momentum, so they had him beat Kane on this show. And he didn't really do much for the summer from what I remember. I know he did that whole thing with The Undertaker a few months later, but this is really just a way to maintain Mark Henry's momentum before The Undertaker came back to reignite that feud later on in the year. So up next, we had the street fight for the ECW Championship between Bobby Lashley and the then-current champion, Mr. McMahon, and which I thought was a really fun street fight and a lot better than expected. This storyline dated back to WrestleMania 23 and the Battle of the Billionaires matchup with Bobby Lashley representing Donald Trump and Umaga representing Mr. McMahon. Bobby Lashley went over in that matchup. Mr. McMahon got his head shaved, and he wanted to exact revenge on Bobby Lashley, so he took his ECW title from him at Backlash and retained it at Judgment Day because he wasn't pinned in the handicap matchup with Shane, Umaga, and Vince against Lashley when Lashley pinned, I think, Shane. So we got this final blow off to the feud, street fight at One Night Stand. Lashley, say what you will about his mic skills, he does not have the best mic skills. He's never really been known for being the best wrestler either, but in this matchup, he really showed potential. He really showed that he does have talent in the ring, and he was working with a fucking 65-year-old man. And I mean, you can argue that I know Shane and Umaga did most of the work in this matchup, but he still showed that he's actually a very good worker when motivated and given the right opponents and people to work with. He had a very good matchup with Mr. McMahon here, like I said before, much better than expected. A lot of cool spots, especially Shane with the flying elbow and the commentary table on top of Lashley. I thought that was great. Shane is known for doing that kind of stuff. Umaga had a cool few spots here and there, so his involvement was welcome as well. And Lashley ended up going over after taking out Mr. McMahon with the spear and the Dominator. Actually, 2 spears after the match ended. But the crowd went crazy when Lashley eventually got his hands on Mr. McMahon. So while the thought of putting the ECW Championship on McMahon was gross at first, I mean, putting such a prestigious title that meant something back when ECW was first around on the chairman of the company was a bit egotistical, both in storyline and in real life. I mean, I know a lot of people probably weren't a fan of the move, but that being said, though, it made people want to see Mr. McMahon get his ass kicked by Bobby Lashley. So they got a huge pop when he eventually beat McMahon for the ECW title. The reign didn't last long because when Bobby Lashley got drafted to the Raw brand a short while later, he was stripped of the championship because he couldn't take the title with him to Raw. So McMahon stripped him of the gold, and they had to turn him to crown a new champion. But another story for another day. But even still, though, a lot better matchup than I expected. And looking at the card right now, this probably was the most exciting match on the show. I didn't think I would say that about a Mr. McMahon matchup, but they really did put forth a strong performance from both guys, Lashley and Mr. McMahon. Umaga his involvement was also great, like I said before. But the one thing coming out of this matchup that really wanted to make me see again, Shane McMahon. Shane McMahon hasn't been in WWE for over 5 years. His involvement in this matchup showed that he's a really fun worker, a great guy to wrestle, a great wrestler. So that being said, though, it made me want to see some more of Shane, and hopefully he comes back to the company at some point and wrestles the match or two, even if he doesn't wrestle the match. But it would be pretty cool after his involvement in this matchup and all the work that he did with the flying elbow through the table, like I mentioned before. It'd be great to see him in a match just one more time. So that being said, we move on to the pudding matchup between Candice, Michelle, and Melina. I guess the story going into this was that Candice had already beaten the women's champion Melina twice before in different matchups and contests and whatever. So their third matchup was a pudding matchup, lasted only 3 minutes. It was pretty much pointless for the most part, but it ended up giving Candice a shot at the women's championship. She beat Melina for the title a few weeks later in Night of Champions. But the matchup itself, I don't want to say it's forgettable or it was bad. I mean, it was stupid. I mean, it was a silly concept, but who can complain about seeing 2 hot ladies in a pudding match? I mean, come on. It was pretty hot. I'll say that much. But, yeah, it was fine filler. I mean, I guess they probably had to, clean up the cartage at ringside from the street fight and set up for the steel cage match and all that kind of stuff. So it served its purpose in that sense. I'm not going to complain about 2 hot women in a pudding match. I mean, no male is ever going to complain about that. But it really was kind of pointless, but, whatever. I'll make that one slide, no pun intended. So up next, we had the steel cage match for the World Heavyweight Championship. And, one second. No, never mind. I thought someone was at the door. Anyway, for a steel cage match for the World Heavyweight Championship, solid matchup from Edge and Batista. I know I've seen this matchup before multiple times. It was one of the featured matches on Edge's DVD. Not Edge's DVD, I'm sorry, Batista's DVD. So I've seen this matchup a few times before, but I always enjoy it. It's a really good matchup. Edge and Batista had one of the best feuds of 2007, and a lot of great matches together at Judgment Day, on this show, Night of Champions. They've always worked well together. That's no secret. So for them to clash once again on this show, this time in a steel cage, was really cool to see. They've always had good chemistry, like I said before. Edge was trying to escape the cage, and Michael Cole, I think, on commentary was saying how scared and cowardly he was, with JBL being the heel commentator that he is and was, turned it around and said, no, he was just being smart, just trying to win the matchup. Isn't it smart to try to win a matchup? So I thought that was pretty funny. But, yeah, it was a good matchup. It got 50 minutes of in-ring time, more than the main event did. So And I would argue that this matchup should have closed the show, but I guess WWE probably wanted to send the crowd home happy with Cena going over and beating Khali finally, all that bullshit. But if there was a matchup, a world title match that should have closed the show, probably should have been this one. I thought it was a lot better than the main event. Enjoyed it. Edge went over, still your World Heavyweight Champion. And Batista sold his frustration well after the matchup. Edge ran through the crowd in an act of cowardice from Batista. But Batista stayed at ringside looking at the world title belt that he almost won and just selling his frustration greatly by, banging on the commentator's desk and flipping it up and stuff like that, selling just how much he wanted that World Heavyweight Championship. So that was a really good matchup. Then we get to the main event, Falls Count Anywhere match for the WWE Championship between the then champion John Cena and the Great Khali. This was during John Cena's reign of terror, so to speak, when he held the title for over a year. So a lot of people probably thought he was going over. The feud was really just to put over John Cena. Khali had been in the WWE for over a year. To see footage of Khali beating Cena clean on Saturday Night Main Event was pretty cool. I never even knew that happened. When you talk about how many times Cena's been pinned clean in the last few years, and I know this was 6 years ago, but I don't think that match is ever brought up. This is the first time I've ever seen that before, with Khali beating Cena clean. But the whole thing going into this feud was that Khali had tapped out to John Cena at Judgment Day, but he had his foot underneath the rope. So that set up a rematch for this pay-per-view. And it really was just to feed Khali to Cena. I know Khali rebounded with a world title win, which he probably should have never won, on SmackDown about a month later. But after this, he just was never the same. He was never a monster. They just kind of ruined his momentum after dominating that everyone came through him, came in his path of destruction over the last year. It's just the same thing with Ryback, with Mark Henry, with a lot of guys, a lot of monster heels. Umaga comes to mind. A lot of monster heels that were just built up just to be fed to Cena, and I just hope that the same thing doesn't happen to Rusev, now in 2014 going into SummerSlam. But I digress. The matchup itself, I didn't really expect much from it. It's the Great Khali and John Cena. John Cena silenced the critics in recent years by saying he can indeed wrestle. I'm not doubting that for a second, but I will say that John Cena has better matches when having a better opponent, when having someone that he has great matches with, great chemistry with, someone like a CM Punk, a Shawn Michaels, a Cesaro, you name it, he's had good matches with them. Khali was never really one of those guys. Khali's a terrible guy, a terrible in-ring wrestler anyway. So that put him in the ring with Cena was not the greatest combination. I know, like I said before, they wanted to tell the story that Cena could slay the beast and whatever, but they didn't really think it through to the point that the matches would not be all that good. To have them back-to-back main event a pay-per-view, I'm not exactly sure if Cena and Khali main evented Judgment Day. I'm pretty sure they did. But to have them back-to-back headline a pay-per-view is pretty ridiculous, especially when the matches aren't that great and it was the same result both times. So anyway, the best part of the matchup, the only highlight that people remember was when John Cena hit the FU onto Khali off the top of a crane on a mat at ringside. It was pretty obvious. It looked cool, but you can obviously tell it was on a mat. That doesn't take away from it, but it was pretty dumb. Anyway, so Cena hits the AA, or the FU as it was called at the time, onto Khali, jumps down, gets the pinfall, and that was it. It really didn't feel like a main event match at all. It didn't even feel like a main event for Raw. It was just not even a brawl. The two were just trading punches, and then Cena just went up to the crane and hit the FU, and that was it. That was for a main event of a pay-per-view, so that was really anticlimactic. And like I said before, it was during Cena's reign of terror when he was a champion for over a year. So I don't know how fans felt at the time, and maybe you guys watching this video do. You've probably obviously been watching, or fans at the time, and you probably know better than I do. So comment down below. But anyway, I just thought that was a really weird way to go off the pay-per-view. I know, hey, John Cena wins, still WWE champion, and beats the undefeated Great Khali. Okay, but what's next? I don't care. You know what I mean? The matchup was really not main event worthy at all. Khali can't work. Cena works better when he's with a guy that he has better chemistry with. Obviously, Khali is not that guy. But yeah, that was just a really odd way to close off the show. It was a happy ending, so to speak, that sent the crowd home happy. But the matchup itself really, I'm not going to even say it under-delivered. It was disappointing because I didn't expect much from it to begin with. But I don't know. It just I would say it met expectations, but that's not saying much to begin with. I don't know. It was just not a good match. Just not a good match. Not a good way to close off the show after what was rather a fine show. So overall, though, after watching One Night Stand 05 and 06, and those amazing events, and I know that was different because there were ECW reunion shows and stuff like that, and this was completely different, and this was a WWE show. But it still was pretty ridiculous to have, the WWE version 1 year later and have it really under-deliver. I mean, every matchup was Extreme Rules, unlike today's Extreme Rules pay-per-view, and this really did. I mean, One Night Stand became Extreme Rules, I think, in 2009, which I did do a review for. Go back on the channel and check that out. But as a whole, this pay-per-view was not the most exciting pay-per-view I've seen on the WWE Network. Certainly the worst of the three. I mean, that goes without saying, between the 05 and 06 One Night Stand installment. And just, I don't know, I wasn't a fan at the time, so I don't know. And maybe you guys that were watching at the time know better than I do. But 07 just didn't really feel like a great must-see year for the WWE. It just didn't really feel like much happened. I mean, we had that whole Mr. McMahon blowing up in the limo thing, and McMahon talked about it on the show when he said he had a bad premonition that something terrible was going to happen to him, and that kind of built the whole limo thing a few weeks later on Raw. But I don't know, it was just really, really weird. I don't know, it's just 07 just. I mean, aside from the whole... And this was before the Benoit tragedy. I mean, after the Benoit tragedy, I know there was a dark time in WWE, but this was even before that happened. So it didn't really seem like 07 was really a great year for WWE. Maybe it was. Maybe it was an amazing year, and I just don't know. But based off what I've seen, and especially watching this show, it just doesn't really seem like this was the most exciting time to be a wrestling fan. I'm not saying today is any different. Like, today is much better, but 07, just solely talking about 07, doesn't seem like the best year for WWE. But anyway... Overall, was a okay show. Like I said, a much worse show than any of the 05 and 06 installments, but for a WWE pay-per-view, it was okay. Definitely mediocre, I guess would be the best way to call it. If there's any matches that you should go out of your way to watch from the show, definitely Lashley and Mr. McMahon. I know that's almost asinine to even say, but a match really was entertaining, so I definitely recommend going out of your way to watch that. The Hardys versus the World's Greatest Tag Team. Everything else was either under-delivered, didn't really get enough time. Edge and Batista was a good match too, but I wouldn't even really recommend going out of your way to go see that. So the tag team ladder match and Lashley McMahon are the only real two matches that really stood out to me as being great. Everything else was okay, fine, a waste of time, or just okay, mediocre. So that's it for my review of WWE One Night Stand 2007. Make sure to check back next week for my review of WWE One Night Stand 2008. And if there's any other pay-per-views you want me to review here on the channel from the WWE Network, make sure to leave a comment down below with your suggestion. Maybe I'll review it on the July 1st edition of WrestleRant. So with all that being said, thanks for watching, guys. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. All support is greatly appreciated. This is Graham Jason Matthews, and I'll catch you guys down the road.